Welcome to Demming Chronicles, where we focus on issues that are current and trending. We speak to persons who give you the stories behind the story. We intend to nudge the conversation in a direction that helps us solve some of our wicked problems. Our aim is to change the conversation because we believe that in changing the conversation, we will change the behavior. On this week's program, Demming Chronicles, we welcome Dr. Dax Driver of the Energy Chamber.
Hello, hi, thanks for having me.
We also welcome Kirk Langton, a creative that we all know.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for having me as well.
Demming Chronicles, we'll be back with you shortly. Welcome back, Demming Chronicles. And this week's conversation, we begin with Dr. Dax Driver. Dr. Driver, welcome to the show. And you know, what's on my mind is that there's a lot of talk about diversifying away from oil and gas and petrochemicals. What is the feeling from inside the energy sector on this push?
Well, I think contrary to what a lot of people expect, there's actually a lot of support for the idea of diversifying away from oil and gas. I think there's a bit of a sense in the sector that it's been sort of asked to carry the full load, and we would like to see other sectors of the economy also taking on some of the load of economic development for the country. So I don't think anybody in the sector feels that this is a problem for the oil and gas and petrochemical industry. But we also think there's opportunities to diversify within the oil, gas, and petrochemical sector as well. And diversify our exports using our energy service companies to export more particularly to the wider Caribbean region with the developments in Guyana and Suriname at the moment in particular, but also then diversify the mix of energy within the country and bring in renewables and bring in greener fuels, try to decarbonize some of our fuels. So I think that there's a diversification is something which the energy sector really wants to see.
Yes, and you talked just now about the energy services and their opportunities up the Caribbean. For listeners who may not understand exactly what you mean by energy services, could you just give us a little bit of information about when you talk about energy services, what are you talking about?
Well, so these are the companies who provide the services to the major oil and gas petrochemical companies. So you have the big companies, the BPs and the Shells and the Methanex and the Nutriens and the Promans in Point Lisas and Atlantic LNG. Those are the operator companies. But the service companies are the people who actually sell services to those companies to do most of the work. I mean, the physical work which happens on those plants, the maintenance work, the construction work, if you're drilling, all the drilling services, these are done by service companies. And we have a real strong set of service companies in Trinidad and Tobago because we have a long history in the oil and gas and petrochemical industry. So you have these companies who have been around for generations in some cases, and they are often locally owned companies. And these are good, strong companies who are able to compete with the international service companies. I mean, I think people probably know the international service companies like the Schlumbergers and the Halliburtons. But you have local companies, Tucker, obviously one that comes to mind straight away, who competes, directly with those international companies, and that's a real strength for our economy.
And what you're saying there, I immediately think of Guyana, because Guyana must be in a position now in which they are looking for those service companies, and they're looking for trained labor and consultants and expertise. So what are the opportunities that may exist in Guyana?
Well, I think that there are many opportunities in Guyana. They have this world-class oil development, which Exxon and their partners are developing, and there's huge global interest in Guyana. It's seen as sort of the hotspot in the world particularly for deep water oil. So the world is flooding there to offer services and to work in Guyana. Many of my member companies from the Energy Chamber have set up operations there. Some have been there for many, many decades. I mean, the Massey's and the Anson McAl's and obviously Republic Bank, have been there for a long time. Major players within the Guyanese economy. But a lot of new companies from Trinidad are also setting up there. And there's still quite a lot of the servicing of the offshore industry in Guyana and Suriname, which happens from Trinidad. So you'll see quite a lot of vessels, particularly going out of Chaguaramas, to service your offshore Guyana and Suriname during the drilling campaigns. Over time, obviously, Guyana and Suriname are both going to want to develop their local companies and develop, increase the content that comes stays within their economy, and that's something which we should be supporting. So we should be, finding ways of having our companies investing in Guyana, investing in Suriname, employing Guyanese, employing Surinamese, and upskilling them to replace the Trinidadians over time.
Yes. Earlier on, you talked a little about renewables. Where are we in terms of renewables? Because that is not up front and center in the public discourse. Where's Trinidad in terms of renewables?
Well, we are behind the curve. There's a lot of places in the world who are much further ahead of us. Here within the Caribbean, we've seen Jamaica and Barbados, and some of the other countries also making really good strides. So we are, we've got some catching up to do. The good news, though, is that that is actually happening now. We have two major solar parks which are going through their environmental clearance process, negotiating power purchase agreements with TNTech. So that's big investments from BP, Shell, and Lightsource as the consortium. One will be in Point Lisas and one will be in the Trin City area. The nice one, the Trin City area one as well, it's going to be in conjunction with the University of the West Indies. So there'll be some good technical sort of skills transfer going on with that. So we are, there are things happening. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in that area. There's also a big opportunity in Trinidad for us to be more efficient in how we're using our energy. We are extremely energy inefficient, and we've got to stop that. We've got to stop wasting so much energy, because this is a valuable resource, which we have the ability to export and earn US dollars and which is the country needs. So we've got to stop wasting as much energy as we are at the moment.
Dr. Driver, you just said that we are extremely energy inefficient. Could you just talk a little more about that?
Well, we are one of the most energy inefficient economies in the world. The way you measure that is how much energy you use in order to produce GDP, which is a sort of a measure of wealth. So the reality is that we waste lots of energy in the country. You think about it just in terms of transport, how many hours people sit in traffic jams, single people in a big car driving to and from work. That just wastes a lot of gasoline or diesel. Think of how people, their houses are set up and they often have electricity running, lights running at night. We have lights on all over the place, at night. People have badly installed air conditioning systems. A lot of industries don't use energy very efficiently because it's been so cheap. So we have just wasted the resource. We can't go on doing that anymore. That's something which is going to have to change.
Are you sending a cue to the government that they need to increase the cost of electricity?
Well, that's something which we have spoken about, many times. So it's, we certainly think that the subsidy on natural gas that goes into electricity generation should be removed. I would put a big caveat there, though, is that there are households who need to have that subsidy remaining in place. So but those are not the households who use lots of electricity. The richer households, the top 20%, use about half of the electricity in the country, and the rest use significantly less. The bottom 15-20% of households in terms of household income use very, very little electricity. So we say leave the subsidy in place for those households. But you don't need to subsidize people's air conditioning. You don't need to subsidize people's, I have a swimming pool and I have a pump running the swimming pool. Should the state really subsidize my pool pump? Should it subsidize my air conditioning? Should it subsidize flat screen TVs? I don't think so. I think that there are things that you should subsidize for the households who really need it. But the reality is that most of the value of these subsidies goes to the richer households. It's the same with the transport fuel subsidy. it goes to the people who drive more with bigger cars. People who are using public transport get very little value out of that subsidy. So we should change that.
Yes, what you've just raised there, the implications of the implementation are tremendous. How do you see us separating out that top 20% from the bottom 20% and arranging the subsidy in such a way that the top 20% doesn't get it? How will that be done?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think it's actually very easy to do with electricity because we all have electricity meters. They're smart meters, so you know how much people are consuming. Actually, TNTech has got some great new applications that you can go in and see every day how much electricity you use. You can go online and do that, and you can set yourself targets, so you can try to control that cost as well. But so for electricity, it's not difficult to do. You just say that the first X%, if you're using under that amount of electricity, then you get the very cheap rate. As soon as you go over that rate, the rate goes up progressively. Now, that does happen to an extent at the moment, but it needs to happen. It needs to be a sharper curve, so that the households who are using more electricity than the average North American household uses, those households should not be that electricity, that incremental electricity above that bottom amount should be paid at the market rate. So it'll affect people like me because I use more electricity than I should in my household, because I have a lot of appliances. Now for transport's more difficult because I think you do have some sectors there of the population who, particularly in rural areas, where the value of the subsidy is not that much to them, but a big percent of their household income goes on transport. So it really there is about getting some really good public transport systems into our rural areas in particular. And that needs to be a government investment into public transport.
So you've raised two critical issues. One of them is the issue of transportation, which is a whole different discussion. But the one about electricity, if it is so easy to do, because what you've really said, what I have understood is that it could be valued and it could be taxed on the basis of consumption. What do you think are the hurdles to preventing us, or the hurdles from us implementing such a system?
Well, I think what's happened is that politically it's a difficult thing to do because nobody wants to pay more for electricity. But I think that we need to be honest about it, and we need to understand the problems that it's created. And what we have to do is not let people who are relatively well off in society claim that this is a subsidy which is for everybody, when really, in fact, the major beneficiaries are people who are well off. And we just need to put the data out there and explain it. And this is where leadership comes in. The government needs to lead on it and explain the issue to people.
And on that note, we bring this interview to a wrap, but I invite Dr. Driver to just give us your 30-second closing comments, summing up what your wish list is.
Well, I think Trinidad has this great energy sector, which has done so much for the country. It is still going to continue doing that for the country. There's still a lot of opportunity, but we have to be serious about the energy transition. That's what's facing the world, and we need to take that into account in all of our policies. But there are lots of opportunities. Point Lisas still has a long future. If we can green how Point Lisas is operating, to use hydrogen from renewable resources instead of just from natural gas, and be more energy efficiency, there's still a long future here for our energy sector. And we have the skills, we have the knowledge and the capability to do it.
Thank you ever so much. On that note, Trinidad and Tobago still has the knowledge. We have a tremendous future in the energy sector. Point Lisas is not a dinosaur, as some people are saying. There are opportunities. And finally, on the note of greening the economy, ensuring that the energy sector and the renewables become the next curve. Thank you very much. And this is Demming Chronicles. We'll be back with you shortly. Welcome back to Demming Chronicles, and we have another exciting guest, Kirk Langton. Kirk, tell us about your business. I know you as a creative, but tell us, what do you do?
Well, I'm in a few creative fields. I'm an event planner, which means everything from creating an intimate moment for a bride to the mass appeal of a carnival fete, to what everyone knows an event planner and thinks about is a corporate event. And even I've done some heads of state visits. But I'm also an event decorator. I also create event decor, just not the traditional frou-frou cookie cutter type stuff, right? Which means that it's all about being thematic. It's about creating specialty props, and basically getting a message across as compared to just creating a pretty space. And that leads to one of the other things that I do, which is an industrial designer, right? Where I work along with an architect. And right now we're busy creating a restaurant in San Fernando, and I'm actually working on a church in Chaguanas.
So from a party to a church to a restaurant, that's quite a wide portfolio. So you seem to be an artist and an entrepreneur. Tell me, why are artists important to any society?
Well, art and artists, we create the moment, right? I say we create dreams sometimes, right? We breathe life and vitality and energy into a moment. And sometimes that can resonate for forever. I'll switch to one of the arts, the music, and say it's like a song that lasts, 20, 30 years. The perfect example when I thought about it was We Are the Champions by Queen, which is played in NBA, World Cup, anywhere you win, wherever in the world, it embodies something and everyone uses it, right? But we also create spaces, spaces that we relate to, and that can uplift your soul, give you something that can build national pride, that, something that we can feel proud to be part of, right?
Kirk,
art as well is the expression, is an expression that people can use from protest to celebration. You understand? Whether it's on the wall as painting or it's the act of protest. Maybe.
Kirk, I look around Trinidad and Tobago and I do not see a lot of beautiful art. As a matter of fact, sometimes I see a lot of ugliness. Tell me, why isn't art being transferred and translated into our daily operations?
I think it's mediocrity, that we've embraced mediocrity. I think it's that the powers that be, the people who are commissioning art, when it's commissioned, as little as it's been, don't understand the sensitivity and the fact that of what art can do, as I just described, to someone's soul. It arises a few times when we've seen, as you just said, bad art, that people don't want to accept criticism. They say, well, why criticize the artist? Why not encourage the artist? It's his interpretation. But it has to make some kind of sense. We look at, let's just use a simple one, like a statue. The Lincoln statue looks like Lincoln. The Martin Luther King looks like Martin Luther King. And that's one of those things that we have to I'm sure there was, or there could have been, a bad version. They wouldn't have accepted it. I don't know why we are accepting it, right? I don't know why we are accepting substandard and saying it's value for money, or it's the, maybe the encouraging of someone who does not or has not reached that pinnacle of expression, right? And I use statues, but let's go now to some other fun stuff. We build cages over highways all the time, right? Cages, they're walkovers all over the world. They don't look like cages. They're bridges all over the world. They're things that people have relationships with, whether it's in some cases where they people put padlocks on it and it's a place that you visit. Nobody visits Trinidad for a bridge.
That's an interesting analogy that you're making. And I just want to switch the conversation a little bit to move to how has COVID impacted your work? Because your work seems to be work that is done when budgets are available. So what has been the impact of COVID-19 on the work you do?
Oh, definitely. It's impacted me. It's impacted all the people who are downstream of me. We made an approximation the other day for a carnival fete that I'm a partner. And we knew that there were 100 people who ranged all the way down to a person who only makes $400 on the day as, let's say, a promotion girl, who will not get money this carnival, right? Whether she would have done, let's say, 10 of those events and made $4,000. The point is all that money is removed. Yes, and even more so for the planner now. For me as a planner, like the event we're doing here, we don't need one. It's the cameraman is still working, like the plumber is doing a lot of work, with COVID. Like the optician I've learned recently has had a bumper year because people are staring at their screens, right? We, the planners, and I thought we were the lifeblood. I thought that this was what drove economies, not just ours, not just a carnival-based economy, but many others, where I think that events tourism is what drives it. Nobody comes to a country, I would say, to go to see a lawyer in court. Nobody goes to visit the accountant in his little office in front of a calculator. But they do come to the great events that might be sport-based, World Cup, Olympics, to the festival, which we totally embraced, of Carnival. Everything is, to me, is an event. Right? We've suffered.
And I hear the extent to which you've suffered, and I'm really intimately aware of how that industry has been impacted. And you've really made a link with tourism. And I wonder if you can walk me through how the arts can become income generating for a country like ours.
Well, that's just it. That was the answer. Sports tourism. Sorry, events tourism. Events tourism that goes from sports tourism to festival tourism to all the things that bring the almighty foreign dollar. I don't want to even say US, because I would hate to think that we'd only think that it's only $1 we'd like to attract. There are lots of reasons to bring a tourist here, right? The Prime Minister was cognizant of that when he reopened the Caroni Swamp tours. It's everything, right? Unfortunately, as a people, we've not embraced that, right? And that's the diversification that we need. That we need people to think that we are more than just Carnival, that we are more than just Richard's Bacon Shack. I'm careful, I'm not saying I don't. I love my Richard's Bacon Shack. I don't want to become like someone else. Right? But the idea is that we embrace who we are, i.e. the culture of Trinidad, and we sell that. We sell the experiential things, right? A lot of it takes nothing but will.
And Kirk, as we wrap this interview, I'd like to hear from you. How are we going to pivot from where we are to this future in which we attract people to our shores because we're proud and we've embraced the beauty and the products that we have to offer? How are we going to do that pivot?
Well, we need encouragement. The artists of all nature, creatives, music, whatever, we all need some encouragement. It doesn't mean handouts. It doesn't necessarily mean grants, but it needs an environment where we feel we can thrive, right? That might lead more even into the private sector where, the soft loans are available, and the understanding that some of them don't, where they assume that a creative, a self-employed creative is the same as a monthly paid worker that can meet the kind of timeliness that they want sometimes with a debt, right? That they don't understand sometimes that you can do a fantastic job in March and get paid in June and not March, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or that our system, our government system, even when we get government work, is exactly that we have to find the money up front, fund whatever our creative input is, and then sit and wait on a vote on money to be disbursed. So yeah, it's that level of encouragement, along with, you know, getting art back into what you just described before, a relatable thing where we don't feel that art is just what we, when you use the word art, we don't think of something on the wall, we don't think of murals, we think of buildings, edifices that we relate to as the Caribbean. It's not just this big glass monolith, or it's, as I described before, cages over roads. It's getting people to have pride in the natural environment. We had that. I saw it very, very intimately. I didn't describe it as my what I do, but 30 odd years ago with the Brian Lara Promenade, we saw that the people related to Port of Spain, i.e. downtown Port of Spain, differently when they were given something beautiful, right? We need to put some more beauty in front of people.
And on that note, Kirk, putting more beauty in front of people, ensuring that the financial sector is able to support artists whose income might not be as repetitive and as reliable as the income for the artist. On that note, we thank you for being part of Demming Chronicles.
Well,
On this week's program, Demming Chronicles, we chatted with Dax Driver of the Energy Chamber and Kirk Langton, an event planner, someone who's an artist, someone who's reminded us that 30 years ago when the Brian Lara Promenade was created, we interacted with art differently. Demming Chronicles. And that's it for our program this week. Until next time, be safe.